Hello out there in TV land or internet land, whatever we want to call it. We are so glad to have with us tonight Dr. Larry Watts and Reverend Rodney Hall. Rodney's put this together. He's a wonderful servant of the kingdom of God. He has a wonderful church here called the Allegiant Church. Dr. Watts has been my personal doctor. I was very careful to make sure we got a doctor who had good knowledge on the subject, but also a good Christian doctor. Dr. Watts goes to church with me. He's been my medical doctor. He's been on some boards that have studied the vaccine. He's also going on missionary trips. And so I really highly respect Dr. Watts for his knowledge and for his commitment to serving Jesus Christ. Again, tonight is not about trying to make anyone get the shot or trying to shame anyone to get the shot. I just want to do my best as your employer, as your friend, to give you all the information you can have, and what you decide to do with this up to you. But I did feel like that I'm not adequate to answer some of the questions, and I know there's a lot of stuff out there that's going around, and I just wanted to go to someone who I know would have the answers for a lot of those questions. And again, you decide to do with what information you get tonight. You decide to do with it what you want to do with it. But again, I want to, at this time, to introduce to you Mr. Rodney Hall. He is our host tonight, as well as hosting us here for this new program. And Dr. Watts to my middle, and I'm gonna let them go at this point, and I'll intervene when you need me to.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Joey. And it is a pleasure to have Dr. Watts with us tonight. He's also my personal physician, and so I have a lot of respect for him and a lot of appreciation for some of the things he's walked me through and helped me through in the past. And hopefully won't be too many of those in the future.
I'm hoping we'll keep those few and far between. We'll say we had enough for that, right?
Although we could tell everybody how I've accused them of trying to keep your customers by feeding us chips and soda, but we won't do that tonight, will we? We won't say anything.
Give my secrets away. It's job security. You know?
All right. Well, you guys have sent in some amazing questions, and they're absolutely wonderful. What I've done is I've gone through and tried to break them down into some categories just to kind of keep things focused in a particular area. And some of them he may answer while he's answering another one. And if so, I'll try to not repeat things too much. But we'll do the best we can, because there are probably about 45 questions here, and we've got a short period of time to do it. So we're going to go, but we don't want to go so fast that we miss anything. I do have my chat open, so I'm watching that. If there's something we're not covering well or something you don't understand, then just type it in there, and I'll see what I can do for you. Okay, see if we can get that question answered better. All right, are we ready?
Yes, I think so.
All right, well, let's start off with hopefully a fairly easy one. It's under my general category, and it's what is in the vaccine?
Okay. And of course, recognize now, I did zero preparation for this. I would like to let you guys know on this, but because one of the things I'd like to do is clarify things for us. And so we talked about, we may do a follow-up specifically. I could provide you with scientific explanation and maybe things that would explain things, you know, from a lay perspective easier. But what is in the vaccine is variable to some extent with each and every one of these vaccines. We have 6 in our country, of which 2 are already approved. That's the Moderna and the Pfizer. That's what's available to you right now. They are both very similar. They're what we call messenger RNA vaccines, and they are the first of their kind in the world. They actually have not been have not been just invented. There's been several decades of work on this. If you want to look at your other vaccines that are coming up, which include Johnson & Johnson, those are actually killed viruses that be like adenovirus, which is one that many of you have been exposed to. We make it like an empty car without the seats, without the engine. And we add the DNA through a recombinant DNA method, which is similar to like shingle shot and some other shots that we have now. And that technique actually converts to messenger RNA and does similar what these are. The difference with these ones that we have now, they are actually messenger RNA directly. The issues with them, as you know, that they're very difficult to handle because regardless of what you might have heard, that this is going to take over your DNA and destroy your body forever and ever, that actually does not happen. And what happens is the RNA is actually gone within a few hours. And so the reactions that you might have in the shot are the initial reactions that occurred with your immune system responding to the messenger RNA. Messenger RNA actually converts to a message to create an antigenic source, which will be a short piece of a single protein. So when you look at this messenger RNA, its whole job is to create a piece of protein that's on the spike. If you've ever seen these demonstrations, I'm going to just hold up a ball shape and we got the little spikes, and that's, you've seen a picture of coronavirus. It's electron micrograph because they're very small, but it looks like it's got these little spikes sticking around. Each one of those spikes are a trimer, which means 3 proteins, all the same proteins hooked together, sticking up. And this antibody, which is a response to the antigen created by the messenger RNA, now attaches to the protein and blocks it from attaching to you. You are considered the host of the virus. A virus cannot live without a host, and it's basically a pot full of RNA and DNA that replicates itself. That's its whole job, is replicating, and that pretty much is done in the first 10 days of the disease course.
So what does the RNA do to our body?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay.
Nothing. Yeah. It actually, like I mentioned, is gone within just a few hours. You know, they think the longest they've ever had is, you know, something over 24 hours. But when you measure this thing, it's essentially non-existent the next day.
Okay. And that was kind of one of the questions kind of leading into that is the vaccine putting anything harmful into my body?
No, it's really not. The only, if the harm is the question that we might look at from true side effects. When you look at having fever, myalgias, fatigue, soreness in your arm, those are responses that your body's doing the right thing. It's creating an antibody response. And actually, when you get another virus, a lot of the fever is coming from your own body generating that. And, you know, pyogenic organisms that produce fever, well, they're actually producing it because of your own immune system. And in most cases, those organisms don't like fever. They want to be at human temperature. And so that your body is actually fighting that. So it's, but the answer to the question is it is non-existent. It's in the cytoplasm, but does not invade your DNA, but it can lead to an antigenic response. Like if you look at other vaccines that we have, for instance, we just have a report this year with our flu shot this year that we had somebody with Guillain-Barré. And Guillain-Barré is an antibody that actually can lead to paralysis. If the doctor can remember it from medical school quick enough, you can actually pherese this or filter out these antibodies and you'll return to normal function. It is possible to be paralyzed if the doctor.
And that's very low risk.
Oh,
right?
very low risk. You know, we're talking several 100,000 chance. So in this one, to date, we have roughly 20 million of the people vaccinated in the world today, just over 10 million in our country as of today.
Really?
And so we've had no cases of that today.
Wow.
So,
Okay.
so it's less than the flu.
Dr.
Okay.
Watts, I think we had a teacher, Michelle Johnson, was having a reaction today. Her arm. I just want to say that we'll let you know if that
Okay.
be one of this paper.
Well, bring the pieces to me so I can examine them real close.
Some people don't think that's funny. Moving on. There's so much confusion, and this is similar to what you just answered, but there's so much confusion over the vaccine. How can you put someone like myself at peace knowing it will be okay to take it?
Well, one of the things that I would have to tell you, if any of you have taken prescription medicine, guess what? You got a lot more faith in the safety outcome of that medicine than this disease. What happened on this, and this is part of the speed of the vaccine, but we had government supporting the cost, which means we took out all of the delays developing the financial aspect of how much can I afford for phase 2 and how much can I afford for phase 3. So we had over 70,000 people taking this vaccine, and the average drug that goes to market and passes to you as a chronic drug is usually around 3,000. So if that tells you anything, that's a safety factor that's way beyond the average prescription drug. So when you look at where was anything missed on this, you know, for the most part, if there's a side effect, it's usually going to occur in those first few months. So it would be those people that had the vaccine back in March. So this vaccine, Moderna, was the very first one in the world. It was made in 42 days. And it's not like it was a new innovation. It was made of something they've been working on, already had the formula of the vaccine, how to do messenger RNA, and be able to preserve it long enough. Because remember, this stuff, it's so fragile, it disappears in your body literally within hours. And even the recombinant DNA, which creates messenger RNA, it also disappears in your body. So, and that's something we've already had vaccines too, and that you'd already be familiar with. We went down the list with that.
So this isn't something that's brand new.
No.
It's based on technology we already have.
Yeah, it is. In fact, the partner, so Pfizer really wasn't the true developer. They actually are the partner that financed a smaller company to do this, but they actually had this vaccine in its format. We didn't have this virus for that vaccine, but we had this vaccine being worked on for a couple of decades, and they actually had this form back in around 2010.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move to the next section. The next section is on side effects and complications. So let's start with what are the danger of allergic reactions? Yeah,
for the most part, they're all pretty safe. There's not any major ones that we're seeing. Like for instance, there were some delays with a couple of like Johnson and Johnson and AstraZeneca, and you're going to hear about those where they worried about deaths. Recently, we had a doctor that died down in Florida. He was the first one that had a death, and it was kind of an unusual autoimmune response. One of the things is probably the most dangerous thing would be anaphylactic reaction. As of today, with 20 million, we've had about 50 or so. And they aren't true anaphylaxis because nobody died from them, but they were called anaphylactoid, most of them, which means they might have started to have the choking sensation, might have been short of breath, some restricted breathing, and we can reverse all of those. You just got to get help at the time. So right now, because we want as many people to get these vaccines as possible, because right now we're going to be dealing with 3 to 4 years with these more rapid producing. There's another scientific explanation of that, which goes into herd immunity. When you have something that spreads faster, it takes a higher percentage of people to be vaccinated. Now we're talking about 75 to 85% of the population are going to have to be immune to this to shut this down. And if we don't get a high level, this is going to be around 3 or 4 years.
Now, if we did reach that, then what do you think the shutdown time would be?
Oh, if we get to 85%, it'll fade within 6 months and we'll be out of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So it won't take long at all. But if you want to compare one, H1N1, you know, that took 4 years. We had 30 million documented cases first year, and then we had 40 more million in the next 2 years. And finally, we had enough herd immunity. It didn't recur the following year. Mm-hmm. But we were vaccinating people the whole time. Mm-hmm. So vaccination plus disease. So there was 70 million people got the disease, and then we had the vaccination we added to the vaccine. And then top of it, some of these vaccines are booster. The vaccine for flu generally is short-lived, and it's not as effective as getting the flu. And we're trying to weigh the balance and scales. And that might be another question I can answer. But so the most serious side effect would be that. And then we have these other autoimmune disorders, which this doctor had, which is being studied today. And that happens with almost every vaccine. It happens with antibiotics all the time. Mm-hmm. And so he had thrombocytopenia, and that's where he developed an autoantibody to that. First, this is one of the things that I preach to every one of my patients is vitamin D. Vitamin D, we're finding out.
Yes, it does. I'm a vitamin D addict. Yes,
I don't let them go out without plugging it in mouth.
It shames me if my numbers aren't right.
Yes.
Your vitamin D's low, Joey.
What in the world's going on here? No.
But my spirituality's high.
But vitamin D, we know, is now becoming autoimmune regulatory, and it's one of the most studied vitamins in world history. We have hundreds of studies now, and every one of them are positive. But we found from the cancer side, the viral side, the autoimmune side. So one of the things, as much as anything, we find out even the children that have died from this, that have had no signs, it was an autoimmune disorder to interferon 1, which is a substance produced by your immune system to fight infection. And so we need to be studying vitamin D from pediatrics. The problem is it's so rare for them to die from this. It's usually like a mild cold or less than a cold for these children. So we only had 74 deaths up through November from all of the school-age children, 18. We had 7 times that with flu. And so, but anyway, so the autoimmune disorders would be probably one of the things for every vaccine and many of our antibiotics and any viruses that you get. For instance, getting this virus and other viruses, we have viruses that lead to myocarditis. So it's better to get a vaccine than not have those viruses. I have a 50-year-old patient of mine. He's got an EF of 15%. It all came from a cold-like symptom. And it turned out it was a virus, developed autoimmune, gave him a dilated cardiomyopathy where his heart function function dropped from 65 to 15%.
Oh, wow.
So his only hope in the long term is either our artificial pump, we're going to try to monitor with medicines, or getting a heart transplant. So that happens with these infections that do invade your body and leave. So when we talk about, benefit risk is what we always have to deal with every medicine and every vaccine. You've got to look at the large numbers, how many people are you going to save, and what is the risk to the people that have high levels of other complications. So the key feature to keep people safe now, because we never preach this with other ones, but they're now going to tell you, if you've had a reaction to another vaccine, not to do it with a public mass distribution, that you should do it with a doctor or facility that has the ability to treat you then and there.
If there is a problem.
And they also, somebody that has a high level of multiple allergies, they're taking 2-3 allergy medicines. Those are the people that are at risk for these reactions that we're talking about. So that's the thing to pay particular attention with your doctor. And I am not afraid to give this vaccine to any of my patients that have that, but I want them to be there. So you're going to find out right now, we monitor you for 15 minutes with these vaccines. Remember, it's going to change with every vaccine, but these two are similar. So they're similar in how we give. And then the second vaccine, which might mount an even higher response, and especially if you are one of those unfortunate that have a more aggressive response, it's going to be 1 hour of monitoring on the second dose. But you need to get the second dose, because that's the efficacy part of this. And I don't know if you can ask any questions about that. I'll talk about that later.
So I have a question just came in online from Sharon. She wants to know which lasts longer, immunity after getting COVID or protection that you get from the vaccines.
Well, right now, that's hard to tell exactly, but my guess is it looks like it's going to be the vaccine based on my personal experience. So we don't have a lot. And the reason I'm saying that is I've already had 3 documented cases of just my own patients that have already had COVID twice.
Oh, wow.
83-year-old within just under 6 months, about 5.5 months. And then I had some 50-year-old within 4 months, and another one just close to 4 months, probably 3.5 months. So as a result, you can't guarantee long-term immunity with the disease. The further you get out from a disease, even includes flu, the higher your risk of getting back. Flu actually protects pretty good, but you can get the flu a second time. But now if you have it twice, that's like a booster shot.
Okay.
So these are booster shots. They did not work, by the way, as well in the beginning. Most of these were they met the margin of the government minimum to qualify for continued funding in phase 3. Remember, there's 3 human trials, phase 1, 2, 3. Each phase was bigger. And in phase 3, these 2 definitely needed the shots, because they were seeing antibodies measured in the lab dropping, and the efficacy was looking closer to 70%. And now we're talking about in the 95%. And there was actually a statement about long lasting. You could have upwards of 3 years, but I would not trust that. That was a scientist that was trying to extrapolate decline of a.
So right now you would say.
Yeah, probably the
vaccine. Yeah, I just want to get through some more questions before we run out of time here. How do we know that there will not be serious side effects down the road, as we have learned about so many other things that we once thought were safe and are finding out now that they cause cancer and other diseases?
Yeah. Well, see, each of these other vaccines is going to be a slightly different story, but not a major difference, thankfully, because we've already had experience with other vaccines with the same exact technique.
Okay.
So the only thing I can say is these kind of already proven themselves, because we have other vaccines, even though they're brand new. It's actually, when you look at these recombinant DNA, which is like Johnson & Johnson, is a recombinant DNA that is combined with a virus that's been gutted and essentially not living, but it's enough for the body to recognize it, so it attacks it, and then
it's enough for your body to recognize it, not enough to make you sick.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And so let's see, the specific part that you want me to answer on that
was how do we know that there will not be serious side effects down the road?
Okay. So that is a key feature. So when you look at from a scientific perspective, remember the DNA viruses, their goal is to produce messenger RNA. but it's after the fact when the DNA is in the body.
Mhm.
So this one bypassed that, but the messenger
We're talking
RNA.
about the DNA of the disease, right?
Yeah, the disease. So they do the recombinant DNA, picking parts of different genes of different bodies, combine it with this other virus. So it's a delivery device. So they have the whole immune system's attention now.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden it's seeing this other DNA surface that has produced messenger RNA, and it's producing these, and the body's producing antibodies to it.
So
So
it's like putting your defenses online before the enemy comes rather than waiting till after.
it is.
Okay.
And so then now you see that DNA has produced the messenger RNA. It's doing the same exact thing as messenger RNA. The difference is we're giving it directly up front.
Mhm.
So we actually know by deduction that it's going to be safe because they've already been safe for years. And so we have years of experience with that part of it.
Okay.
So
Great.
the only thing difference is there was an oil droplet because it's harder to preserve. It was easier to produce it with DNA, but there's some advantages, which is a long scientific explanation of putting it in directly. But like the case of Pfizer, very high tech to get them to survive. Remember, they're 70 to 94 below zero to
Wow.
preserve these things. So they actually have these tiny little micro oil droplets, and they're putting these nanoparticles with messenger RNA in those oil droplets. And the reason for that is to allow them to exist long enough before they just disappear in the body and reabsorb, so it can have enough time to cause reaction in those first few hours. And it's gone. So we already have experience based on the DNA, which produces messenger RNA in our body, and ultimately becomes like these vaccines. These are just a direct shot to the messenger RNA.
Now, if there were any long-term effects, what might they be?
Oh, the long term, probably the most serious ones that we know of, right? This would be creating auto antibodies to something in your system, like this doctor, for instance, with thrombocytopenia. Now, I don't know what his DNA was. I don't know if he had a genetic defect for, because people that have autoimmune disorders are more likely to get other autoimmune disorders. Meaning, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, you have Hashimoto's for thyroid, or other autoimmune disorders, you're much more likely than the average person to get an autoantibody reaction. And so just remember, when this virus, and the virus does that too.
Mm-hmm.
So getting a virus does, just like one of my patients, he's got an autoantibody to his, and it wasn't from a vaccine, it was from a virus. We actually have more of those cases.
So we could actually be looking at long-term effects from the virus,
but
or even more so than we could be from looking
at
long-term
absolutely.
effects from the vaccine.
And most of these actually occur in the first 2 months. So there's very rare anything, because remember, this thing has disappeared out of your body. Now we're talking about these two vaccines we've got right now. And that'll be an additional discussion, because there's slightly different interventions with the next 4 that we're going to get. 2 of those will be on the pipeline probably within a month. They got delayed because they have to study anything that happens during that study that was of concern. Especially,
is there any reason that somebody should wait for those new viruses? Thank you.
New vaccines. Well, the only reason that you wait is you would have confidence in Johnson & Johnson, or that you know.
And technologically, you don't have any reason.
I personally don't. I've had so much hope in these, because part of the reason that the development was going on with these was to develop a universal vaccine for illnesses like flu, where instead of having 200 different variations of vaccine, you could have one vaccine that you could target specifically at something that's in common with every one of those flu.
Right.
So then you do one flu shot and a booster, and you don't have to get the flu shot every year. And each year right now, we're picking 4 of the most common species that are circulating in other parts of the world, and hoping that we're right. But on the average, we're pretty good. But the more people travel, the more they integrate, which is increasing. It makes it harder and harder to predict. And so we miss that 15% of the time. And sometimes the vaccine typically might only be 70% effective. And sometimes they drop down more than that, especially if you get them early. If you don't start vaccines early in the flu, that is, because they are not long lived. They're roughly 6 months. You drop 30% efficacy. That's why we say first part of October unless you're in the middle of a flu epidemic, because we're just getting ready to go through our usual flu season, which is February, March, April. And so, so there's different things. So our flu shot is shorter lived. We think, well, and it might be just purely because it's got a booster, but we already know that we have almost a year behind us with the first patients. Their antibodies are still holding up. So that's actually a good sign. So that's what one of the scientists made a statement.
So I heard a futurist the other night, a PhD in future science, say that because of the investment and the work that's been done on these particular vaccines, that there's going to be a lot of new technology coming out, similar to like when we went to the moon and all that new technology. Is that are you saying that? You think that's true?
Huge.
Okay.
Huge. I mean, we found some crazy things like medicines that have antiviral effects. Being on medicine protective, like Prion-East, angiotensin receptor blocker, metformin recently with Alabama, cutting the death rate down by 67%.
Wow.
So less than a third of the death rate of something that's common and cheap. And then statins, being on a statin actually is helpful because that's anti-inflammatory with the second stage of the infection, which maybe we could go back and rehab some of the things we've learned, because there's a huge amount of things. And now we found being on vitamin D, low and high, 70% reduction in all other upper respiratory infections. So, there's why we did
work for researchers to come.
It is. That's it. Means they're going to ask for public funding.
Yeah, a lot of
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah, please.
I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth or steer this direction in any way, but it almost sounds like you're saying the vaccines that are out now have a better success rate than the ones that may be coming.
Yes, right now that's true. Right now that's true. That's why if I had a choice, now I hate to tell you why I would have picked Pfizer against Moderna, because it wasn't really rational. It was political. But Moderna has actually turned out good. The thing is, Moderna actually started out during the time when Pfizer's partner had developed this, and some of their people were actually got that information from there. So they started exactly 10 years ago, which is when we had this. So ding ding.
Yeah.
And so and so when you're stealing people, it's like my son-in-law was bought off by Microsoft to leave Falcon.
Right.
And so 350 people all of a sudden are not making Samsung chips anymore. They're working on quantum computing. So, that was the only thing. I just didn't like the scenario when you're stealing technology, and people might not know that.
And since we got kind of into that political field, I do think it's important to note that a lot of the concerns that people have nowadays is about truth from politicians and things like that. But I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is that while there is marketing and stuff with these companies and things like that, it's not the same level as what we're looking at with politicians trying to get reelected. These are for the most part scientists that are trying to do good in the world.
It is. Our president, whether you like him or not, actually did some unique things in this that were different than everything. He doesn't trust the federal government. Here he was the head of the federal government for a while, anyway. And so he had an independent party, because we know the FDA, we've had officials, we know that we're paid off and bought off and use their power to control people. I know one particular that's involved in several things, and we know you don't want to let the wolf in the hen house, because there can be a financial reason for doing things too. So, but for the most part, there's serious consequences to researchers that lie. Like, for instance, Duke's recent fine of $123 million. You probably remember that.
The politician might get off, but the doctor probably won't.
Doctor's not going to get by with it. So, and we know that there's huge. I mean, we got 85,000 lobbying attorneys that are spending billions of dollars to influence our Congress. But, like, for instance, me as a doctor, I can't take a penny from a pharmaceutical company. They can't leave pens or papers. They can help with CME now, as long as they don't take credit for advertising during that CME.
Oh, wow.
So if we could do that in Congress, we're going to straighten up the act.
All right, now that's a wholly different discussion. So we're going to move on.
But no, you're right. They're going to be in serious trouble, and they will be permanently banned from getting federal funds through NIH. So a
or
researcher,
recertified,
yes,
or whatever. Yeah.
So if the researcher cheats on that, he will be permanent, and he will not get any further grants as a lead research scientist. He can be the most famous one in the world. He will be a secondary one. He will not personally be able to direct the grant again. And so,
Good to know.
yeah.
All right, and I'm doing just a little bit of housekeeping with both you and Brother Joey over there. Please don't play the drums during our conference. Thank you. All right.
We got the rhythm, I think.
Yeah, he had a good beat, though. I'll say that.
It's amazing how much that gets amplified across the
And
microphone.
I should know that by now. I must be a slow learner.
All right. Can I get COVID from taking the vaccine?
And the answer to the question is absolutely zero chance of that, because there is no living virus of any type. Again, all we're doing is making an antigenic surface to a piece of one protein. There's no such thing as a protein living form.
Okay.
Yeah, even the viruses, you have hundreds and hundreds of proteins with multiplication. And we're talking about taking a segment of one protein. So there is zero chance of getting it. So whatever reaction you got is only from the antibody response and the immune response from your body to that antigen that we created to stimulate your immune system to do this.
And I think you kind of touched on this, but if you can just give us the short answer on this, which vaccine would you recommend, Moderna or Pfizer?
Right now, right now, if you look at the statistics, and I hate to say this because I had,
And that's from John. Thank you, John, by the way.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, but because I was actually more for the Pfizer just because of a political reason only. But Moderna actually has less side effects right now.
It does.
And so, but the thing is, I don't trust the
Is there
research.
a big difference in the side effects?
No,
or
not
slight?
a big difference.
Okay.
It's a slight. And
I had
realizing that,
Pfizer, by the way.
what's that?
My first shot was Pfizer. By the way.
Yeah. And I actually like Pfizer too. One of the things I know they were leading technology, and their technology ended up in the other company. I'm almost positive.
Okay.
But when if you look at some of the things that have happened, and it's not very big. It's a fairly small number relative. Remember, they were the first one out there. So the other thing is nobody managed to break down the ratio of that too. So when we look at the ratio of, like, if say anaphylactic reactions, and so, but if you look at total numbers, but realizing Pfizer, we had over 1 million doses given to Europe before we even approved it, and it came from our country because which is a statement. I don't know if you want me to. That's.
Yeah, let's not go too deep.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not off of page 1 yet. I got 3 pages here. All right. So now this one's a tough question, but maybe you can speculate. What are the unknowns? How do you know what you don't know? But what are the unknowns?
Well, the unknowns are mostly this autoantibody reaction, and we know the oil particle that was used with Pfizer to preserve and build up the immune response, might have had an effect on that. Is that going to be? There's no preservative, which I actually love that about these vaccines. No preservative. I was so mad when I found out that there was mercury used to create a vaccine, to attenuate the virus.
That was years ago, right?
Yeah, years ago, not recently. And so you find out this stuff afterwards. Then you find out your dentist has put mercury in your mouth to dissolve the, put the amalgam of this. So, and these heavy metals are not good for your system. So I like the idea of no preservatives, really, but it does make it harder to give. That's why we go through all of this freezing. Yeah, you can roughly have 10 days to put it in these containers that have dry ice in it, and the original rules, you can only open up twice a day, 3 minutes, twice a day for 6 days. That was maximum. So you had to do all your distribution, pull them out, let them warm up for at least 2.5 hours. And then you leave them out too long, the vaccine becomes worthless.
Right.
So the big thing, you got to trust who's doing this, that they know what they're doing, and they're not going to be like the pharmacist that set them out and destroyed 500 vaccines,
Right.
And then you're injecting nothing. You're injecting worthless nothing. There won't be.
So another reason why to not just get anybody to do it.
That's right. That's right.
Are certain chronic diseases more vulnerable to side effects and complications than others?
Yes, they are. And so when you look at some recent deaths, which Pfizer's had to address on there, The bad part about this is these are the same people that are dying with COVID. So when you look at somebody with end-stage cancer, end-stage lung disease, and these get these, and they're 80 pounds, and there's no muscle mass. I will tell you a side effect that, it's not to scare anybody, because it was really a misadministration that just happened recently, and I had to treat the patient, get him to emergency room for, and she's fine afterwards. But somehow she was given the vaccine, and it got into the artery, and it went distally into her hand, and so then her hand became the source of reaction. You don't want that in small vessels where this vaccine is in your bloodstream. You want it in mostly in the muscle mass, and there was no muscle mass. So, and it was not a doctor. It was done by a pharmacy assistant or something. It was actually done in a nursing home. So, so there is that risk when you have low muscle mass and their immune system is awry anyway. Just remember, one of the things that happens, why the elderly die more prematurely from COVID is this inflammatory reaction, which means your body is actually destroying itself. So the virus attaches to your body organs, whether it's your kidneys, your heart, your lung, liver, and then all of a sudden you're releasing what's called cytokines, and they're targeting to that virus, but the virus happens to be now part of your organ system because it's infecting all of the surface, and it's going to destroy your organ system. So young children don't have the experience of their immune system being hyperstimulated multiple times through life, and the elderly do, with hundreds of viruses over their time. Every one of us has had a virus. The average child has a virus every 1.2 months that's at least symptomatic in the first year of life. So, so viruses are a normal common thing for us. So if you want to see your DNA be affected, you've had more RNA and DNA given by viruses in your childhood than you'll ever have by any vaccine by far. Yeah.
So the executive summary then, the people who would need to be extra cautious with a doctor or something would be your elderly, low muscle mass.
Yeah, and the people that have had previous allergic reactions to other vaccines or a high allergy index of developing allergies to their environment.
Okay.
So, and that's what they're picking on now. They don't want to have the usual allergies that other vaccines always have. So now we're trying to be selective, because the whole thing is, there's conspiracy and there's some crazy stuff that's happening, and everybody shouldn't trust everybody. But and so one of the things that they want to do is try to limit those reactions, because they always make it to the press and then everybody thinks that's the only vaccine that ever happened. The truth of the matter is the statistics are still very good for these vaccines.
And that's a part of it, isn't it? It's that we hear of every single case.
We do. We used to not tell
millions of people.
It is. We never used to hear that on the news. They paid attention to somebody trying to aim missiles at us and stuff. Was somewhat important.
We just don't hear about the guy who drowned in the bathtub.
That's right.
the statistically low. Okay, so here's one. Just curious if, and this is also from John, just curious if both vaccines are made from the same platform, why does one have to be kept well below freezing, the other one doesn't, or is that just one of the myths?
Yeah, they're similar platforms. The truth of the matter is they both have to be preserved. And so when you look at the difference, the long-term temperature is roughly 94 below for one and 70 below for the other. So there's not really the big difference around. The difference is with Moderna, we have it in our area because we've got a longer survival time. You can keep it for a couple of weeks with usual storage. And now that we have an option to refreeze it, and Pfizer has come up with that too. Theirs is a 10-day cycle. So you can waste it. The other aspect.
So it's a shift in the preserving technology, not necessarily in the
it's a shift
in the part of it.
It is.
Okay.
It is. And there's one other aspect to that of why we're giving it in certain places, and that is because the Pfizer was shipping in lots of 1,000, and Moderna was shipping in lots of 100. So for rural areas, that made it more difficult, which meant once you open this thing, you got to get these vaccines out or you're going to end up wasting all of these things. Okay. That's the last thing we want to do. We want to have people lined up and ready to go and know exactly where they are, so we don't waste those.
All right. Now, I don't know if this person has this situation or they're some kind of medical person, because I'm hoping I'm going to pronounce this right. If you are allergic to Pneumovax. Are you likely to be allergic to the COVID vaccine?
Well, not likely, but increased likelihood. It's like
You
the
can't get
statement
the
I
sound
said.
back
If you
on.
have rheumatoid arthritis, you increase your chances of getting lupus
It's like
or
I can't get it.
Hashimoto's thyroiditis or some other autoimmune disorder. But the true chances of that's in the one in thousands, when you come to those autoimmune disorders. So it's not highly likely. We're not talking about 1 in 1, 1 out of 2 or anything. We're talking in the hundreds, 1 out of 100. So, but the thing is that 1 in 100,000 is going to be on the news.
Right.
And that's the reason that we're doing it, because we don't need more public scaring crazy stuff that's out there. We got Facebook and people start a rumor and it becomes something the opposite. It's like this one causes cancer, and like metformin, one of my patients asked me that, and I said they're studying it for cancer, and now we're looking at longevity preservation, and now it actually cuts down your death with COVID by 2/3. So it's kind of an interesting thing how things get reversed, when you play gossip between each other, and then we lose the science, or there's one small detail that somebody's extrapolating, and it becomes more than what it really is. But,
what are the contraindications to getting the vaccine?
well, right now there's not much other than what we already mentioned. There's really not much. Yeah, there would be if you find out that you have a severe allergic reaction to the first vaccine. So it's usually a component relationship or an overexcitable immunity, in the case that you have lots of other allergic reactions that increase your chance, just like having an autoantibody disease, and then increases your chance for another autoantibody. So we got to be careful on how we select our patients that way, and then be extra cautious. Like one of the things that I'm planning on doing with some of my patients that I don't think should get the vaccine right now is that I will keep them in the office. I'm going to give them antihistamines, and we may end up having to give a little bit of a steroid to slow the dose. I don't want to cut it too much because the steroid potentially might cut the efficacy of the vaccine at the time, but I might have to inject steroids if they have a major reaction. So I'm going to keep injectables right then and there.
But again, that's really low, and you're making sure that's
done.
And that's why people who have susceptibility need to.
That's right. They need to make sure their doctor may not have resuscitation equipment, and they may have to do it in a different place. We happen to do it because we do cardiac workup, and so I have all of these emergency devices, just like EMS paramedics in the hospital has. So it'll be easy for me to do, and I have observation rooms.
And I just want to point out here, and I think Joey will agree with me, that Dr. Watts, he is such a good doctor because he goes all the way down the trail, but he goes to very, very small percentages of things sometimes. And so I don't want anybody to get freaked out because of those kind of conversations. We're talking very, very small, and he's taking precautions even for that very, very small percentage.
Very small.
Thank you for sharing that, because I know he goes to the nth degree to make sure he's looking after his patients.
That's right.
These are very small cases he's talking about.
Oh, extremely.
But they're the ones you see on Facebook, and then they think it's happening to everybody.
Oh, and it's not. And please don't extrapolate that, because I don't know of any doctor that's had any side effect there. We gave out 1,000 to personnel in our area, and then most we had was a sore arm with anybody. There are some people that are you're going to get the low grade fever. I take if you're high risk, I'm going to be giving you Tylenol in the beginning. I'm going to give you Benadryl in the beginning, just like I do with blood transfusion, because there's a risk you could have a reaction to that blood transfusion. So I do that with every blood transfusion because I just want to keep it simple. I don't want them to be frightened about it. So I just pre-treat them.
Right.
So if somebody's really frightened about it, but if you truly have one of those things, just be careful, because guess what? Your statistic will keep people from getting vaccinated.
Yes.
So the idea is we want to be more cautious than we are with the other vaccines, because we never did it because it was such a low incidence anyway.
Right.
And we never even talked about it.
I'm going to try to pick up the pace here just a little bit because we are pretty behind here. So moving ahead, how do you feel about those who are planning to become pregnant, breastfeeding, getting the vaccine?
It's probably going to be fine. I would have to say we would like a little bit more data.
Okay. And that was the other question.
Yeah.
Has there been any research? And
Yes.
it's not thorough yet.
Yeah, it's not thorough. It's like studying the younger kids, especially below 12. We won't be vaccinating below 12, but we're going to have trial groups because we're looking at the safety of this. It seems to be safe. It's gone in your system, and so there's not a high likelihood. But we would like to see, another 100 million vaccines and see if there's something that happens rare, because it's like these children that died from COVID. They had this unusual thing. There's only a few, but they had this autoantibody to interferon. So we find these strange things, but that really are small numbers, but they bring a lot of press. Nobody ever talked about the nursing home deaths. You look at our numbers, almost 200,000 nursing home deaths. Almost 8% of our nursing home patients have died.
Wow.
And we hardly bring that up, except when we're blaming certain governors and so forth for whatever they did. But guess what? One child dies. That's the news.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so those strange reactions have a tendency to sway personal appeal. But we're talking about the virus doing this. So
right.
yeah, we're not talking about
vaccine.
the vaccine. The vaccine has we have no relationship to those kind of things, or relationship to deaths that are directly. So
okay, thank you, Nathan, for your question. He's asking online. So are you saying that if you have allergic reactions to a lot of things, you should not get the vaccine?
Yeah, I think one of is discussing with your doctor, because I don't know what those reactions you're talking about, but I am certainly going to be spending some time with every one of my patients about that before I do it. But it's not high risk if you have a history of taking the flu vaccine, you've had the pneumovax, you've had Prevnar, and you've had other things as an adult, tetanus, and you've had no allergies to that. It's pretty low risk. I mean, it's low risk anyway, but because here's what the main goal of mine is. I don't want any of my patients to have anything serious, because it could cost other people's life because people not taking the vaccine. If we don't get this vaccine out and get a 75 to 85, we're going to be dealing with this for 4 years. And that'll be my prediction. It'll be just like this.
You're advocating that everyone who can take it should take it.
Absolutely.
For the well-being of all of us.
For all of us. Yeah. The younger people, I'm going to tell you, the people that I've had to take care of, that we've intubated and we've been in the hospital through Thanksgiving, Christmas, guess who brought the disease home? Most of our diseases are 20, 30, 40-year-olds running around. They won't wear masks. They won't protect themselves from grandpa, grandma, and their older parents. And guess what? We have these 80-year-olds sheltering, which all my patients know. I just badger them. Well, you know how I badger you.
I don't know at all.
No, I don't either.
Well, I said, doctor's pride is to have the oldest patients in town. So you mess it up, you ruin it for me. So I'm not going to let you mess up, right? So
should have known there was a narcissistic angle to that.
No, there is a narcissistic. We found it. No, I just don't like deaths at any age. But so there's a selfish part. But the idea, what really bugged the daylights out of me was, one of them didn't believe this virus is real. They come in there and he says, I'm never going to get tested. And they came, I said, I just got little cold symptoms. Mother ended up being intubated, was in the hospital for 5 weeks. I just saw it today. And so when you look at that, she had gone nowhere, seeing nobody, but all of a sudden for Thanksgiving, the kids had to, because they'd always sell. And this happened numerous times. So
we've got some good questions that are going to come up that are going to tap into that. So let's move forward if we can. Back to the pregnancy thing. Can vaccines cause infertility?
No, that was one that was discussed, but it looks like that's a very unlikely possibility.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Can the vaccines
affect autoimmune situations and different things to sperm and stuff? I mean, stuff like that happens normally, but it's going to be a really rare event.
Right.
Yeah.
One of those things that could. Okay. But it's very, very unlikely. Can the vaccines affect my DNA? And I think you answered that before. No.
Zero.
Okay. Right.
And
can it cause paralysis, breast cancer, or long-term effects? I think we sort of answered that too.
There's no cancer. Now the paralysis potentially, because we just talked about.
And you said that could be reversed.
Catching her. So Guillain-Barré. So if anybody that gives you a vaccine doesn't ask you, have you ever had a history of Guillain-Barré? that should be asked.
That's when you look at the nurse and go, what? And she says, then you've never had it.
Yeah, then you've never exactly. So then she told you that. Didn't
Oh
she?
yeah, I've been asked that before.
Okay. So right now, Guillain-Barré happened again this year with the flu vaccine, but it's not happened in 20 million people that were vaccinated to COVID. So,
and you were saying earlier too, if they have had allergic reactions, you're not saying not to get the COVID vaccine, but talk to your doctor.
no, that's right. I would still highly recommend you get the COVID vaccine.
Because I think COVID could cause you more issues with.
Oh, it is. It would be.
Yeah.
The only thing that we're talking about is an additional layer of security. So the doctor would be there. I'm going to observe them longer. I'm going to keep my patients, once we do the vaccine at the clinic, I'll keep them there probably an hour at least. I'll be monitoring them for 1 hour afterwards.
Okay, I think John's coming back to Nathan's question earlier about allergic reaction. And I think he's asking Nathan, but I think you can probably answer it here. Are you referring to, is he referring to, but I'm just going to ask you, are we making any demarcation between vaccines to other drugs and other vaccines and things, or to any environmental things like pollen, trees, dogs, whatever?
Yeah, potentially they're looking at that part because, and of course, all you can extrapolate is the cases that we've had. Remember, there's only 50 and nobody died out of 20 million that have been given already so far. Okay, and we had about 6 in our first 5.5 million in our country. But so those are anaphylactoid reactions. That meant that they had swelling in the throat. Nobody died. As long as the patient, typically if they've had other allergies, they know the risk. They might even be on an EpiPen. So if you're on an EpiPen, I would not take the vaccine without supervision, just like I wouldn't take any other vaccine. But we just haven't talked about that to our patients before because it's such a rare event. But the biggest thing is we don't want to deter people. We want to be done with this mess as quickly as we can, and we're not going to do it unless we get 85% of the population or very close to it. I think Fauci said 75 to 85. I estimated at 85 when I was calculating the anticipated viral change that we got from Brazil, which is spread to Japan, and then we got the South Africa virus. But the one that we've got here now is this new European model, which is more infectious than this one. The one we got currently is 3 times more infectious than the one we started with.
And that's one thing that we'll point out here is that Dr. Watts didn't just get the journal and go. He has to go study everything very carefully. He's a lot more thorough than most of the doctors I've ever had, at least. It's my understanding from relatives, this is another question, in the medical field that the 2 shots now available were developed using a genetic type technology and has not been used before. And you said that it has been.
Yeah, we already had this technology before. And the truth of the matter is every one of the other modern vaccines that most of you have probably had, because the modern vaccines are recombinant DNA vaccines. Remember, the recombinant DNA vaccines that have been out for a long time, shingles and other ones that we've had, those are DNA that trigger messenger RNA in the body. So it ends up being the same vaccine, but because it was so hard to get the messenger RNA to exist, because it would just disappear within hours, it's easier to create something that's in the cell that's producing it on and on. So,
but this one does not invade the cell.
No,
of our cells.
No,
it makes the virus cell, but not ours.
The problem with this one, the technology, was to get it to exist long enough to produce enough of an antigen so that your immune system could recognize it. Otherwise, it would just be absorbed and be done.
So if this weren't enshrouded by all of the political controversy that's going on, then it sounds like this would have been touted a tremendous medical breakthrough.
Been probably one of the top 2 things in the last century, probably. Wow. Outside of, in science, in medical science, probably. When you look at the number, and part of that, you'd have to ratio how many lives are being lost by a disease. It was something to have Ebola. There was 30,000 lives. It wasn't nearly as infectious as this. You remember how big of a deal that was.
Right.
But, so when we look at this, if we
that also had a higher mortality rate.
Yeah, mortality rate was high. Yeah. And but it was not nearly as infectious. But the mortality was really high. So we lost.
And that's part of the problem you were saying with the mutations, is that because it's so infectious, it mutates faster. Is that?
It is. And
Okay.
so the more cases we keep out there, the more mutations, of course, occurring. So once we can knock this out, then we get it to be in a stable form where it's not going to be changed. Now, we don't know. It could be like the measles vaccine. We hope that's the hope. But the measles vaccine, we have the same vaccine for decades now.
Yeah.
And we've not had to change it. And there's been mutations with it. As long as there's small mutations made at a time, then your body continues to get exposed to it. And we build this autoimmunity to it. And there's an adaptive immunity that occurs. But when we have big wide jumps, or you have a localized region that is isolated from someone, they make a whole series of mutations that all of a sudden come into another environment, and we make a big jump, then we might end up missing the bucket with it. That's why the quicker we get immunity, we're all better off. Yeah. We're less likely these mutations are going to exist.
Now, I don't even know what this one means, but you can tell us.
Okay.
Do the vaccines have unsafe epitopes in them that affect our immune systems negatively long term? And I think you sort of answered that.
Yes, yeah. And the answer is not any more than any other vaccine.
Okay.
And just remember, the vaccines you've already seen, and I mentioned shingles earlier, essentially it's producing this vaccine. This one is trying to be smarter by just putting it directly out there. But we had to figure out how to preserve it so it could last long enough to exist in our body to do that. And of course, these are like silver bullets targeting tiny little pieces of protein. And the idea is that we could find protein and we might use it for multiple coronaviruses. We may be able to cover this for many of the coronaviruses that are part of the common cold complex and other types as well. So if we could.
So there is hope for the common cold.
There is, yeah. But guess what? The hope that was already there. One that we treat coronavirus now was zinc. And of course now, so zinc wouldn't take coldies and some of these other.
Just so I don't get in trouble, I have been taking my vitamin D and my zinc. How about you, Joey?
All right, and vitamin C too.
And vitamin C.
I got my little whip out. Right?
All right, is it?
Here we go. Here you go, Joe. Your vitamin D's a little low. I'm trying to copy Rodney.
And we won't even get into the part where all the things that could happen to you because your vitamin D is low.
I do badger my patients. I'm sorry out there. That's probably why you want to stick with your doctor saying about.
Is it true that the vaccine can cause antibody dependency enhancement, causing your body to react worse if you're infected with COVID instead of keeping you from catching it? And that there was a failed vaccine for SARS-CoV that actually caused this in some cases?
Yeah, right now we don't see that.
Okay.
Yeah, we have not seen it. And of course, we have all of these vaccines, over 250,000, that if someone was surround the messenger RNA again, because technically every DNA, the recombinant DNA vaccine, which includes several of these other ones that are out there, there's actually 116 attempts at vaccines, and many of them are using that technology. So essentially, they would have the same problem as an RNA vaccine and more, because they've got DNA involved with this thing and another virus that could stimulate more antibodies. So technically, this should have less than the traditional vaccines. That's the theoretical advantage of this messenger RNA. And those other ones were actually using the more traditional value. So we did have an effective vaccine to SARS-CoV-1, by the way. And in Hamilton, Montana was a group of scientists that actually had a vaccine to this and was successful in the beginning, but they were such a small group. I don't know where they're at in their research. They didn't have. They might have sold their technology. It could be part of Pfizer. I didn't know for sure. Pfizer buys up all of these little companies that use their technology and they become employees.
Technology.
Yeah.
Jonathan asks, will this vaccine cover all the strains of COVID or just the ones we're dealing with today?
Right now, it looks like that they are likely to cover even the Brazilian variant that we have, which is now spread to Japan, and we also have fairly good evidence it'll cover the. Sorry about that.
We're hearing you.
Just let
If
me.
you took your vitamin D, you wouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, I know. That's,
We'll tie him down for the next one.
vitamin D deficiency. It's the cause of everything. Yeah. No, and of course, the one that we do have, we have at least 5 states that have this now that we know, and it's probably a lot more than that. But we have the European variant, which spreads much faster, which
And
is
it covers that one as well.
yeah, it covers
Okay.
that one. So we think that as long as these variants don't make big jumps, little jumps, that we're probably going to be okay with this.
Okay.
But realizing if all of a sudden this spike protein became a totally different protein, these messenger RNAs would not work anymore. But most of these vaccines are gearing towards that. So that's another reason why we want to get to it, because are all gearing towards, because that's the easiest target. Remember, this is the attachment point to your body where these little spikes come in and attach to receptors on
But that's why it's important for us to get it as quick as we can.
It is.
Stop this thing from
It
mutating
is.
to another.
It's foolish to wait 2 or 3 years because the more millions that are out there not vaccinated, there's more opportunity
For that to mutate.
to mutate. So statistically, it just adds to the risk. And so the quicker the better. The quicker the better.
Great. So mothers and babies ask, will the pneumonia, shingles, and flu vaccine interfere with COVID?
The answer is no, but if you've had them within 2 weeks, we tell you to wait until at least 2 weeks to get the COVID vaccine.
Okay.
And that's because, and every one of these vaccines hyperstimulates your immune system, and we don't want to overstimulate your immune system to create a hyperactivity reaction.
Okay.
Hypersensitivity, excuse me.
Well, let's switch from side effects and complications to process. How many doses or shots will I need and why?
Well, and you're going to make it sound like it's not effective when I tell you this, but there's 2 for each one of the ones that are current. So the Pfizer is 2, and it's 3 weeks apart minimum. You can get it later. Don't wait, because here's why we got 2. It looked like their efficacy was about 70% with a single one, and it looked like the antibody response was going to fade quicker. So by adding this, and it's obviously worked because we're approaching 1 year with the Moderna vaccine right now, and still holding our antibodies, which is longer than what we had with the flu.
Wow.
And so that's why one researcher estimated we could have 3 to 4 years. I hope he's right. That would be a great thing to just give occasional boosters every 5 years instead of, it's less costly trying to get people to do it, and you have more chance to. So the Moderna is a booster and it's 4 weeks as the minimum, and you can go over. They would like you to stay as close as you can, partly just because that's what it was researched. We don't know for sure if you'll lose a few percent by getting it 6 months later versus 1 month. Because when you sensitize, and then the next is going to be a bigger reaction. Of course, they're going to monitor you for longer.
And what was Pfizer?
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
3
Okay,
weeks.
3 weeks and 4 weeks.
3 weeks.
And that's for the booster, and then we're not sure next year what happens.
Yeah, next year. So we're going to have 1 year under our boots as far as March with Moderna, and Pfizer's not far behind. It's really close to that. So we'll have a full year behind us. And they look at the antibody stability. It's like watching titers. I don't know if I talked about titers to you in the office.
I don't remember that.
I'll cover it next time.
Okay.
Right after vitamin D.
Right after vitamin D. Yeah, it is vitamin D. But if those titers stay high, that's a good sign. It's like everybody that's involved in healthcare, and all children today are vaccinated for hepatitis B. They have 3, right? So the reason that you have 3 vaccines for hepatitis B is because we didn't have a cure for hepatitis B. We have a pretty good cure, but not 100%. Like C, it's 98% cure, but it was always devastating, and it was very expensive devastation, and as well as demeaning to me. And so, but sometimes people over the years have lost that, and then we have them get one more type of. So we check their antibodies in the blood test. So if they go to mission trips and it's been more than 10 years, we kind of like to have them check the antibodies before they go with us, and certain vaccines, or just get another booster to it after 10 or more years. In many hospitals, when you hire, if you don't have recent data, they'll automatically order a antibody. We'll be able to do the same thing with this.
Okay, great. Sarah asked, if someone was in their first trimester pregnant, would you still get the vaccine?
I would, but it's a question that we don't have as many pregnant women studying. You know, how we study pregnant women and children typically is after the fact. That's why their medicines are much older, and we don't put brand new medicines out there because we don't want to have needle effect. But right at this point, there's no preservative in this thing. We got the little oil droplet with the Pfizer that is nanoparticles injected to it. Don't really see anything. It's nothing that's been a carcinogenic agent in the past. So personally, if I was pregnant, which I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I don't think that's going to happen.
Just guessing, but yeah.
If it does, I want to be your marketing manager. For
Thank you.
percentage.
He sees a business opportunity.
Yeah, I see that.
He's jumping on it. Yeah.
He's a true preacher. I see that.
What a blessing in the
When
kingdom.
you pass the plate, he's got another idea.
Him and his accountant, they work out the details, don't they? Yeah. But you know, one of the things you'll find out with this thing, that pregnancy and COVID have a risk. Having a disease.
Okay.
I personally would say this is far less risk than getting COVID. And then if
Getting it weighs a lot heavier than.
but as scientists, we're going to be much more careful. We're also more careful on children that can't give consent, you know, and you know, we're looking at risk benefit. And as we know, keeping kids out of school has had major consequences. Failure rate, I can't tell you, that was not a wise thing. And it wasn't recommended, by the way, you know, with CDC and
By the way, let me say that Falcon Christian Academy has had in-person classes for most of the year.
Amen, brother.
Dr. Stewart.
Safely. Safely.
Safely. Yeah. And that's what the Center for Disease Control said. They said there, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Academy of Family Practice, the medical advice, what happened was not medical advice. It was people doing their own thing, and it became a political wedge and a power control. But the other thing is nobody spent the time to teach teachers specifically what to do and how to protect them. But then we end up putting grandparents with kids at home. And so you protect the high-risk teachers, you teach them how to protect themselves. You know how old I am, and I've been seeing COVID every day in the hospital,
Right.
in the nursing home, in the clinic every day, and I'm out with my little garb, and I feel confident, but I worked in respiratory infection for much of my life before I was a doctor, so
Right.
it was easy for me to do that, but and it's not easy for somebody to develop. Now, most of our doctors are comfortable with that. None of our doctors ever got COVID. I can't say that for every clinic because
Right.
some have, but I feel bad for solo practitioners that have had to figure this out on their own.
Yeah.
And many of them have got COVID. They didn't have the PPE and
Yeah.
the other resources because we all provide our own expertise. And, you know,
Yeah, and that's something we've talked about in a video in the past, is that Dr. Watts has, and some of y'all probably know this, I know Joey certainly does, that he's had a extensive background on the mission field, which he's dealt probably more with infectious diseases than most of your general practitioners, most of your clinic people, just because of that.
and we've been around Ebola too,
Right.
which is something, and I don't want to say anything about that, but good intentions end up leading to that breakout with people that just weren't informed. And it's doctors that had a good heart, they just didn't know what they were dealing with and how they attracted a disease that's incurable into another population. But you know,
It's a part of the reason the news media and politicians should probably stay out of medicine.
they should.
All right, enough politics, moving on. Are all vaccines in pairs? If you get the first and it causes cellulitis, should you get the second?
Cellulitis is usually a complication of skin infection and not usually related to vaccine unless there was a contaminant. I hope that whoever's providing for you did. But yes, I would get the second one. But cellulitis, it's usually a surface infection that's there. Usually they're white, and it's so rare with these fine needles. And as long as who's giving it has a sterile technique and nobody's contaminated that vaccine. But yes, you should get the second. Maybe not the same site. If you've been infected in there, I would move to a different site.
What is a safe time frame? I think you sort of
But-
answered this.
Oh,
Let's-
but the other question I think missed it. Not all these vaccines have two.
Okay,
So Johnson & Johnson, for instance,
the one
is
that's coming.
probably the one that's coming is only going to be one.
Okay,
Okay. I like Johnson Johnson. They actually
How far out are we from that one?
within a few weeks.
Okay.
It'll be definitely in February, we think, because they're already finishing the FDA approval.
But it
this
has
thing.
not been tested as thoroughly as this one, as far as you got 20 million.
Oh yes, no, we don't have the data out there, but they've got pretty good data supporting it. You know, the company's well trusted, other than these lawsuits against talcum powder and
Right.
stuff that they've used. That was kind of unfortunate. They actually were a supporter of missions. They have a big Christian heart in a lot of different things. I hated that happen. They were actually one of the ones that supplied a lot of different things and missions. You know, but Pfizer has done that in the past too, in different things.
Yeah.
And every company's made of some Christians and some not.
Mhm.
But I hated it because there were some people that had a true heart for missions and people. But
Okay, so Moderna and Pfizer have the double dose.
Double dose.
One with the boost, 1 3 weeks, 1 4 weeks, and then Johnson Johnson will
only be one.
dose. Okay.
And what they'll monitor there is they're going to do like the flu shot. They're going to monitor their antibodies and see how that launch out. But I'm going to tell you this, and that's not to cut down one or the other, but they actually were better, more efficacious with a single dose than Moderna and the Pfizer. But we might learn how to do that more in the future. And so they may end up doing it, but it's not as efficacious as the double dose of either one of them.
Okay, so it's not as effective.
It's not as effective.
And
But only slightly less.
That fits what John's asking here. What's the difference between Johnson & Johnson and the other two?
Yeah, what kind of vaccine is it?
No, he's asking, well, what's the difference between them? One, as you mentioned, the efficacy is not quite as high with Johnson & Johnson, but it's only one dose. Is there anything else that makes it different?
Oh, yeah. This one is actually the one I referred to as the recombinant DNA that is a virus. We got one of them that uses a moth to grow it, so it's not stem cell or fetal cell.
Okay.
Yeah, and neither one of these have anything like that either.
Okay.
In
I
fact,
think that's one of the questions.
yeah, and there's something more I could expand if you want to ask that question
Okay.
specifically. But
All right. Well, let's continue moving through the process here for a moment. What's a safe time frame to wait and see if you have side effects from the vaccine?
right now, it's 15 minutes for the first one. However, if I have somebody that's high risk and I'm doing it, I'm going to be keeping them there at least an hour.
Okay.
At my office, and I even talked to other doctors there. We'll probably come up with a protocol between all of us. But and that's one advantage, put everybody's minds together. But I'm the backup for nuclear medicine over there in the CT when we give. So when we have a reaction, Angie, for instance, our CT tech, within seconds you recognize little sneeze and a little cough, and you might have a little, or they might have just a little itch.
Mm-hmm.
So she gets me in the first seconds of the earliest signs.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, I've had multiple reactions, but usually we can get in there within 2 minutes and I can reverse it right away. So we have a blue light, but usually I'm only 30 feet away, and that's actually why they put me there. So I can immediately reverse it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you got to have a doctor that's comfortable with that. And
right.
so you can't force your doctor to do this, because he might not have the equipment there, especially if they're sole practitioners. It's really hard to have all this stuff. I've been grateful to be part of the clinic because, we have so many people there that we have more resources. So but he'll probably refer you to somebody if he doesn't feel comfortable, and just be honest with your doctor. Don't try to do something that could put you at risk. And I hate to say that, because if you're high risk for COVID, getting the vaccine the sooner the better. And if you're around somebody that's high risk, grandparents, parents, you need to protect the ones you love. I mean, it's not about you. If it is, you got to question your true Christian depth of belief on there. It's about others as part of the 2 greatest commandments. So always look to the people you're around. Remember, and I'm not going to start beating you over the head, but I was so mad.
I don't believe it. Do you, Joey?
I was so mad about some of these family members that didn't protect their loved ones. I mean, it's such an important thing. You've got to have compassion for the people around you. It's not about, the world doesn't have to revolve around you. You've got to look at other people. That's what the definition of a true hero is: somebody that's willing to sacrifice themselves for future generations without any personal gain in their lifetime. And we've had those before us.
And I think most of it just simply comes from people who don't think it can happen to them.
Well, that's exactly that.
That's always
Yes,
the
it is.
case.
Until it kills one of their family members, they don't think it's a real thing.
Right, exactly.
Until I get hit by a train, it's not a big deal, right? I'm just gonna
Right.
get bumped.
All right, so will this be a required shot every year? And we don't know that yet,
Yeah.
basically.
But he was saying probably 3 to 4 years right now.
Yeah, one scientist made that extrapolation. I hate to say that universally, I can't pass that out as scientific fact. And he made that extrapolation by looking at decline of antibody titers.
Right.
And so that's the only statement. And of course, we're going to be able to. The advantage of us, we're not the research trial. The ones that are going to be failing are the ones that had it first in last March.
Right.
And so
Right.
we're using their data to keep us safe.
Mhm.
That's why some of them are paid $1,200 a piece plus.
And I think that's important because there have been a lot of people that have already gotten it, and sometimes it can seem like it's brand spanking new, and in some ways it is.
Yeah.
On the long term things, but it's not as new as we might think.
No, it wasn't. No.
See, I didn't even know they were giving it back in March. I
Yeah.
didn't know it existed. So that's kind of comforting to
Yeah.
know that we're really not the guinea pigs.
Right.
No, you're
And
not.
I didn't know that the technology was similar
I
to the
didn't
things
either.
that we were already
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
on. So
And just remember, this is messenger RNA. So if you look at the older now we're not going back to polio. That's some of the original ones. You're given the actual virus and you try to figure out how to tame them down so they don't give you the full disease. Then we went to these killed viruses from attenuated live virus vaccine. And then we had the new generation of genetics, which is expanded in the 70s and 80s and blown up. It's the key thing. Molecular biology is
Right.
the big research. Anything with a mAb on it, just go ahead and look at the name monoclonal antibody, all your cancer drugs. I mean, it's just a long list. Psoriasis, which is an autoimmune process, and rheumatoid arthritis. Monoclonal antibodies. This is kind of the future. How President Carter is alive from melanoma. He had brain mets. They're gone, and he's been years into melanoma. And that was all the same technology. So remember that technology was these recombinant DNA. The DNA that vaccine gets into your body, produces messenger RNA, and does the same things these are. We're just speeding up. So we already have knowledge of that. So that's why I'm not worried about it, because we have all sorts of years behind that. And it's the same thing. The messenger RNA created from them never did anything, and it's gone too.
That's really good information that I haven't read on Facebook.
That's your scientific source of preference, right?
All right. So this is a really good question. If you receive the vaccine, do you still need to be quarantined after being exposed?
Ideally, yes. It's such a low risk. We may change that, but because you're around other people that aren't vaccinated, part of this is if you got a 5% chance of it, you're likely not to die, because nobody died that took the vaccine. And I'm going to make a statement right now if I can, because this was the FDA.
You got the mic.
Okay, so
And this was FDA approved, right?
well, it was FDA approved under emergency use. They always put this stipulation.
I know that
in
was
it.
a question I had heard.
Yeah.
Was
And-
it FDA?
And because they like to go through many years, but the truth of the matter is we have many years of messenger RNA. That we don't have many years of messenger RNA.
So that is one of the upcoming questions. So you might as well go ahead and answer it right now. Why is the vaccine not FDA approved?
Well, because regulatory issues that we follow up now scientifically.
So it's approved for emergency use, but they don't have the long-term data yet to give the rest of
That's
it.
right. But from a science standpoint, we've already had the data.
Okay.
We already been using messenger RNA in every one of these recombinant vaccines that were FDA approved.
Okay.
So I mean, to me, it's kind of a no-brainer at this point. But preservation techniques and other things are slightly different, and we like to have long-term data for everybody. And we can let's see, where was that?
You were gonna make a statement. I interrupted you. I apologize.
Yeah.
Because you're about to preach to somebody. You said, "I'm gonna make a statement."
I'm sure it was vitamin D, wasn't it?
You were about to say something. Make a
Zinc.
statement. Maybe I shouldn't, and I cut you off, and I apologize.
Okay. Yeah.
Something about the safety, or I don't know what was it. What were we talking about, Rob?
We were on
I cut you off, I
will you have to be quarantined after you get
Oh,
exposed?
yes. Okay.
I'm sorry about
Yes.
that.
No,
I missed you.
that's no problem. No problem. And the answer to that is it's for other people, not yours, because nobody had serious COVID and nobody died. So nobody had a serious case of COVID. It was all mild COVID, even the elderly that had it, which normally doesn't happen. Remember, somebody that's 80, one of the data showed it was over 8% to nearly 25% death rate. The nursing homes would be up to 50% with high risk people for this. So that's a bad thing versus kids, it's almost non-existent.
Right.
Yeah. And so here's the reason for doing it. You're doing it for others because you could be the carrier that gives it to other people. So it's not likely to hurt you, even if you have that 5% chance of getting it. It could hurt other people. So the answer is yes, it probably is going to be.
And just to clarify, what we're talking about is these vaccines have a 95% success rate, basically, to keep you from getting it. There is still a 5%, just like there is with the flu shot. There's still a chance you could get flu.
Yeah, the flu shot typically is about 70 to 85%. So this is way more effective than the flu shot. So looking at, and the other thing with flu shot is we can't predict that we got every flu.
Right, because of all the different strains.
Yeah, so even when we give the quadrivalent, which is 4 every year, there's a 15% chance on that we're going to miss one strain completely. Like H1N1, we didn't have any vaccines yet in 2009.
Right.
And we did an emergency vaccine of that one. It was a little bit easier because we had something similar to that before. And we didn't make anything fancy like what we got today.
Okay, great. If you have a living will that denies, now this is a little bit off topic, but I think it's people might have this question. If you have a living will that denies you're being put on a respirator, how then are you treated for COVID? And can you survive if your life depends on the respirator and you decline its use?
Yes. One of the things that being on the respirator is actually probably the last thing that I would want to be on. I would use CPAP, BiPAP, ECMO, and high flow. So we looked at some of the data with respirators. There was nearly 80% mortality once you got on a respirator. So one of the things that we have extended life is by avoiding that. And you can do it. It's not comfortable being on BiPAP. It's a pressurized mask, pressurizing air going in. But the survival rate is much better. So the answer to the question is, if you could have a DNR, but you can change it at any time because that DNR paper is ripped up as soon as you make a different decision.
Okay.
So the only time it wouldn't be ripped up is if you're in a coma and conscious, can't speak or communicate, and that paper has to be honored. It actually can be a charge against the physician to, for instance, to resuscitate somebody that didn't want to be resuscitated. We actually had a doctor sued for saving a lady's life in California that proved that point in court. So I don't know. Did that cover it?
I think that was real good. If you're exposed, could you be contagious even though the vaccine is working in your own body? And I think you just answered yes to that. Yeah. And that's why we might still want to be quarantined. So if having COVID does not give us antibodies from catching it again, how does a vaccine protect us from catching it?
Well, the answer is COVID does give us antibodies. And I had 3 of my patients that have had this, that had had a confirmed negative test afterwards because they're doing different procedures, and then finding out later they end up having a cold-like symptoms. And I said, well, we probably should check you. And that turned out that it came back positive after being negative. Now, it could be an error in the testing because our testing is definitely not perfect. But the truth of the matter is that we do have antibodies because every one of those had lesser symptoms than they did the first time. So they in a way were protected. The idea is that some people may have a more severe course that might have a higher level of protection than a mild course. The idea of viral load is something, I don't know, that might relate to that. For instance, if I just got a few viruses, I have a moderate antibody reaction that might be able to curb that and not have much symptoms. If I get a big load of viruses, that's one advantage of having a face mask or a shield, that you don't get blasted with.
Right. And I don't think people really understand that the mask isn't just, it's not a perfect thing, but it cuts down on the amount of virus that you could potentially get.
Viral load. The other greatest part is, it's like when I'm in the clinic, I'm wearing a mask and a shield when I'm within a meter. Now, we require N95s or K95, and they filter out 95. But if I sneeze in this, I have less than a half of an inch of projectile, but it might leak out above and below on my seal, and the mask directs everything down, and it's not. And so where I'm wearing this, why I put this cotton picking thing on for 11 hours every day or more if I'm in the hospital, and because I wear it in the nursing home when I'm over there too, is to protect my patients. Because I've got one of my patients is 94 years old that was sitting in front of me, and she got COVID, not for me, but you know, I keep on thinking about I just saw one of my patients who's 104 just last week, Thursday.
Wow.
And if they get COVID, and she's survived a lot of things, but now she's got a lot of complications in her life, but she's made it a long ways.
Right.
Just to now get complications, you know, she's not as likely to live. And so I'm doing that to protect my patients. And so we actually have a requirement, because we've got to keep it safe in the clinic from the employee standpoint, but the other one, so trying to protect them when I cough or sneeze or talk. So when I'm talking 1 meter out, normal talk is about a meter. I have droplets that are projecting out there, whether you can see it now or not. If I'm singing, we're talking about 6 to 12 feet. If I'm sneezing, 12 to 20 feet. And then we have a thing called drift. That's why I tell churches 30 feet, because it's been documented to 29 feet. Try to have, once you take masks off and you're singing or speaking as a pastor, you know, keep the elderly away from the front rows, keep them on the flanking rows, and as much as you can. That's for that reason, cutting down. So you're protecting others by cutting down your load to them, and then they're protecting themselves by reducing the load externally on that mask.
Okay, good. We're headed into the home stretch here, so let's see if we can rush through a few here.
If I could ask something real quick, evidently the people on the Zoom tonight are feeling your passion, because I've had some send me, and I don't put you on the spot, but they want to know if some of our high risk potential ones to get the shot, if they could get it by Dr. Watts at the medical clinic. Talk to me later. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
well, we'll have to figure out something, but I mean,
somebody texted me and said that I think they have some of the issues. They would want somebody to monitor them because they're concerned
that they do have high risk.
Yeah,
and I don't know. Their doctor may be able to cover everything fine, and I think one is discussing. But you let me know, and we'll try to see what we can do.
Talk to the people who text me.
I would give some guidelines. You know, there's no perfect science on this. Please don't criticize any physician or peer or provider, anybody, if they don't say the same things that I'm saying. You know, I am kind of obsessive compulsive about lots of things.
Vitamin D.
Yeah, well, yeah, there it is. Vitamin D. But I don't like death. I don't like to take chances with and then again, narcissistic, because I'm gonna have the oldest patients in town, right? So
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Rod. I'm gonna get it.
But yeah, we'll try to work, because we want everybody to feel safe at whatever they're doing. One of the things from a Christian perspective, because you're dealing with your staff, I think every one of them are Christian people, are dedicated to the ministry.
Some I'm not sure about, but for the most part,
the wrist is shaking.
My wife's the only one I question.
But one of the things, faith is such an important thing. If we do something without faith, you know, it's literally a sin, because God said He did not create the spirit of fear, and we only want the thing that God wanted for us, and He does not want fear. It's a destroyer of a lot of things. It's also a destroyer of protecting you, because we do these double-blind studies. Why? Because there's a placebo effect, and I don't call it the placebo effect. I call it the faith effect. You believe that something's going to be right or something's going to be wrong. Both directions can be helpful or harmful. So medicine has to beat the placebo effect. Guess what? 30% of disease symptoms can be cured with the placebo effect. So that's why they have to do double-blind studies. It's such a strong, faith is a strong thing. Yeah. People just didn't realize that faith exists, and it's a real thing. Science has had to combat faith all along for that reason. So I don't know if that's too much of an aside.
No, I think that's.
But we want to protect it. We want everybody to feel safe, and I may have said things as an overprotection, but you know, I I want to preserve life. I want the good people to live a long time so they can help the people that are running astray for a long time. And I don't want anybody to die without
That's
the
why
law.
you like me and Rodney so much.
That's what it is. All right. If we took the Pfizer vaccine for our first dose, do we need to take the Pfizer for our second dose?
And the answer to that question is absolutely, right at this point. Remember, every one of these vaccines are slightly different, but they're so close, but they have a different sequence that they're representing. And so
you want the right booster for
you do, otherwise the efficacy cannot be guaranteed.
If I can answer that too, I had my first shot. They have to give you the second shot. When you go, you got a card and it shows what shot you got first. So the professionals can't give you that. They have to give you that same shot. So
They do. You could kind of come up, but
unless you went to another place to get it.
yes. And we actually have something that kind of curbs that from accidentally happening. There's a national registry. Every one of these shots is entered in a national registry so that we can keep track of that safety force. But somebody could give you the shot and do it afterwards accidentally. It's possible, but do not get a different type of vaccine. I suppose theoretically you could get 2 separate vaccines and do 2 separate shots, but right now I would not do that. It would be selfish to remove it from somebody else until everybody's done. But that could happen.
So the short answer is take the same one.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Do we have to get our second dose on the exact? They said 14th day. You actually said it was 3 weeks and 4 weeks, and I think you already answered that. You said it could be some difference, but as close as possible is better.
Yeah, close as possible is preferred, just because we want to follow the data of the research. But you can get it afterwards, 6 months. It's better to get it sometime afterward than not getting it. But try to get it as close to their prescribed time. It can't be before 21 days for the Pfizer, and it can't be before 28 days for the Moderna.
Okay.
From the time you get the shot.
Let's switch to development pace. A few months ago, CNN said that the vaccine was being developed too quickly and was dangerous. What are the dangers of the vaccine being developed so quickly?
That you save lives.
Okay.
So I guess they didn't want to save lives. But here's
and a few months ago, Donald Trump was president, so
yeah.
Somebody might get mad at me for that, but really, I mean, the news media narrative has shifted.
Oh, it's really crazy. But here's what happened. The research was not shortened with these. So how many knew that?
Yeah.
So we went 6 months, and here's the official statement. The FDA. Okay. The FDA said in October that it is unethical to continue any research, because Pfizer actually requested continued research because they were going to tweak one more step in their virus. They thought they might even improve it further. But the problem with doing research is you got to keep these people on placebos, and there's some high risk people, and many of them died that were volunteers that didn't get the vaccine, and nobody died that got the vaccine. So it now became, why did they spend another 6 weeks making a decision while Europe approved it right away when they knew all of this stuff, and they got all of our vaccine earlier before we did.
Right.
It makes me wonder about our logic and things. But so
I keep going back to Star Trek, because I'm a Trekker from way back, and I see by the look on your face, you're like, what? Where is he going? But Dr. McCoy would come up with some amazing vaccines for stuff in 45 minutes.
Oh yes, I'm hoping we can do that someday. Well, computer generated vaccines. Once we get quantum computing going, then we might be able to do that at some point. Just adding another virus and automatically doing a DNA sequence. You have the vaccine base, and then you're just plugging in a different DNA sequence, and that could be done shortly once we have confidence that computer generated and else. But here's actually the shortened part of this whole thing. It wasn't the research time. So remember, the average medicine or vaccines could take longer, but it's $1 billion to take the average medicine from the research phase to the market. So here we have an animal phase, we have a human phase, second human phase, 3 human. So why do we have these phases? They study the first phase, they see, well, did it do anything? If it didn't do anything, they stop right there. They are not going to waste $1 billion. Now, they thought it did pretty well, but they had to analyze the figures to see how much they could afford to do in the phase 2. And they stopped after phase 2 to to see is that we're spending the biggest dollars because that's your biggest number of people, the biggest amount of expenses, because all the expenses from the other phases are still coming in, and during that whole time, because you're monitoring all these patients frequently, doing blood tests, making sure that there's no health risks that are coming along. And so what we did was the government paid for this, so now they didn't have to worry about stopping and analyzing the financial part. They knew if they got to phase 3 and they made 50% efficacy, they were guaranteed a spot in the vaccine market, and they paid for the whole thing. So we spent several $billion through the Trump administration to eliminate that part, so we could eliminate all of the pausing for the financial evaluation. Was it worth it to go forward?
Okay.
And then find out in the third phase.
So the next question was, were there any steps overlooked? It was just basically the financial part was compressed.
The financial part.
The medical part was not. The scientific part.
Yeah, 6 months is the normal research.
Okay.
And here's the thing is, here's one statement. Any medicine that exceeds the point where there's people dying and it becomes statistically significant is stopped. And many of these, they usually stop it at 6 months, which is about where both of these exceeded that. It was no longer ethical not to give the patient. So then they had to unblind the patients that got a placebo vaccine. They didn't know they didn't have a vaccine. Remember, there were several people that died to help you get a vaccine that was safe. And that bothers me when people challenge that, because there were some heroes out there. Now, they did get paid for it, I would have to tell you, but it wasn't enough to lose their life.
And of course, there's been a lot of COVID patients that did not get treated and also died without being a part of the trials.
Oh, yes.
So that's been
during the whole time. I mean, 400,000 in our country right now that we know.
So the rush was not to excuse the step. The rush was because it was inhumane to let people die.
Oh, it is.
While we were just trying to get this medicine.
It is.
Just get to them.
Yeah, we heard the extrapolation to every negative possibility that you could. I mean, I think it was a miracle whether any individuals get credit for it. I hate to mention anything Dr. President Trump, but he actually donated $1 million of his own funds for this process too. So I think he believed in it, and there may have been other politicians that may have put their money where their mouth is. I don't know, but if they say something, I think it was really an applause, and it's kind of a shame that our society wouldn't get credit for it. And guess the world wants our vaccines. Our vaccines are going to be the dominant vaccines more than anything else. Now, China has sold all sorts of vaccines, but people aren't trusting the Chinese as much with their data on there. But we do have, guess what? Who helped China develop the vaccine? An American company helped China. They went over to China, gave their technology, probably permanently away, but they gave their technology to create their best vaccine. So that's actually American technology too.
So we probably don't have to answer the question about has anybody turned into a lizard? We haven't seen that
Well,
yet.
since I've been going in the dark, it's been a big advantage because my wife just puts me in the corner every night. I'm a nightlight, so she's been thankful for it.
Yeah.
If you don't take vitamin D, you're going.
Yeah.
This could be the
Yeah.
lizard.
We're back to vitamin D.
And sometimes his wife treats him like a lizard. But other than that,
That is
a little pet lizard,
all right, efficacy. We're
and
moving
these
on to
spines
that.
that are going up my back.
Is it true that the vaccine may not last very long and then we will be susceptible to getting the virus again? I think you answered that. We're hoping 3 years right now at least.
Yeah.
And that may be, if there's enough people that get it, that may be enough to actually not necessarily need it in 3 or 4 years.
That's right. If we have a high enough thing, we can actually shut it down, just like we did smallpox. Not everybody in the world got smallpox, but we had a high enough percentage. Smallpox only exists in cotton picking laboratories that scientists kept just in case there was biowarfare. And unfortunately,
Just in case we want to start another pandemic.
Yeah. And this virus, I hate to tell you, that's another story, but we actually had this virus also in our level 4 labs, and we had an opportunity to make a vaccine back in 2015. That time we didn't think it was a threat. And of course the Chinese had it in their level 4 lab, and they were modifying it. And so we have some pretty good knowledge that this is a virus that had modification to it.
It's like the microbiology world of Jurassic Park, right?
It is, literally. I mean, it's kind of a reality today.
Yeah. How, okay, I think we've answered that one, so I'm going to move on. some say our immune system creates a better defense against COVID if we get the virus. So in that case, why do I need the vaccine?
Well, the answer is we really don't know that. Now, it's somewhat true with flu. If you have a fairly severe case of flu, that it's actually looks to be better than the virus, but we don't know that about this one. Right now it looks more efficacious than any of the flu vaccines we have, but again, it's a double vaccine. That's a big
It
part of
looks
it.
more what was that big word?
Efficacious,
Okay.
more effective,
Okay.
works
I
better.
got you.
All right, alternatives. We're going to switch to that gear, and we're actually doing pretty good on time now. I think we've caught up, and that'll give us a few minutes to kind of sum up and see if there's any more questions online. But if someone has had COVID, why do they need to take a shot? Don't they already have immunity? And
Well, the answer to that question, I already have 3 patients we've proven, and one was 83. And the other part is that we don't know how many months after COVID that you'll drop to a low level of protection. So these coronaviruses have been difficult to create vaccines to, and it's kind of amazing we have highly effective vaccines right at this point. We don't know if it prevents you from spreading the disease or not. And that's probably one of the questions that people are looking at is are you more likely to be an asymptomatic carrier of the disease for the 10 days of the replication cycle? So that's something we've got to study and look at potentially, but it certainly looks like it protected people. There's nobody died during that study, and we had a number of people died that didn't get the vaccine that were part of the placebo arm. And we got a list of those names. We should write thank you letters to their families for their participation.
very good. I meant to mention this earlier and just wanted to point it out, but there are some videos on Vision of Unity's Facebook page that talk about some of the precautions and things from, it was actually several months old now, but I will point out that Dr. Watts was pretty much 100% on target with his recommendations all the way back then before we really had evidence of a lot of things. And he's glad, otherwise we would have had to remove him.
Yeah, you can look stupid after the fact or smart after the fact. So, but it's kind of a random chance sometimes.
But we have kept them up there because they're still poignant to where we are today. So that is available if anybody wants to do it. It's just the Vision of Unity website. If you type that in, you'll find it. Not website, excuse me, the Facebook page. What are the dangers of not getting vaccinated? And I know you've answered this somewhat, but let's give it a concise answer so that everybody really hears it. What are the dangers of not getting vaccinated?
Well, there's one of the big things. If you're young, it's losing your mother, father, grandparents, or people that you care about. However, I would say one of our first deaths was a 27-year-old in our county. So it can happen younger. We've had deaths younger than that in the school age, but it gets less and less as you get on the list, about 74 up through November in school age children, 18 on down.
And that's across the United States?
Across the United States, yeah, across the whole United States. It was actually 7 times higher, or 1/7 that of flu. So what were we doing, shutting down schools?
Well, okay.
And we put them home.
So flu actually killed more children than COVID.
Oh yes, by far. So that's kind of an interesting feature of this. Of course, we've had to learn about what this thing does different than other coronaviruses. But that's the other part of your question.
What are the dangers of not getting vaccinated?
Oh, the other, the dangers. One of those is affecting others around you if you're young. If you're old, it's a terrible way to die. And being on a ventilator, being intubated. The other thing is, we're not talking just deaths from COVID. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of complications of people with renal failure.
And some of these are long lasting.
Oh, lung disease. I've got a 38-year-old. Oh, I felt sick. I went saw. He wasn't my patient. He apparently waited a long time before. So we had to airlift him up to Rex. He was up intubated for 4 weeks. He has 5 children. And one of them is Down syndrome, and all of his kids end up getting, so I ended up treating them when he got back out of the hospital. They got it shortly later. But anyway, he worked for Smithfield, but he's not going to be able to work again. He's permanent oxygen dependent now. So it damaged his lungs so bad that he's going to lose function. And it's going to affect his lifespan. He's not going to live a normal life.
And then the general danger is that we as a country won't be able to get back to normal.
Yeah, the financial craziness. We just picked up will this next $2 trillion. We'll pick up $5 trillion of debt that we're going to give to our kids for future. It's going to be inflation. What you have is going to be worth less. And I hate that for my grandkids and kids, you know, to leave a legacy like this. I mean, one, that there was different ways to do things. Realizing in the early days we might not have known what we were doing, but geez, it became a political wedge in our country. And as you know, it's a division, which God doesn't like division. Two visions means division.
Division, that's right. That's right.
But so other than death, there's things worse than death. We have some people that have had some bad complications from renal failure, dialysis, liver failure, heart disease, heart failure, because it attacks the heart muscles and everywhere where you have what's called an ACE2 receptor site, which is virtually every organ. That stands for angiotensin converting enzyme receptor.
We'll be tested on that later.
Yeah. Get the biochemical.
I learned the word there until I go to his office.
So next visit, better know.
I'll write that down.
I'm tough on my parents.
You know, I'm glad you asked that question, Lonnie, because I've had people say, well, I fear the effects of what the vaccine may do long term. But I tell them COVID, it may not kill you, but it can affect your body long term.
Right.
Yeah,
with things that would be much worse than any kind of reaction to a vaccine.
yeah.
It was my feeling. I mean,
It is. We've had autoantibody reactions with this. It's like, well, even MS. Everybody knows somebody that's had MS. MS comes, we're pretty sure, from a viral infection. And it triggers an autoantibody response. If you can prevent that viral infection and save MS and be on vitamin D, that's
vitamin D, that's right.
Yeah, that's actually that is something that actually has shown to lower the incidence of MS by 40%, more than 40%, according to studies we've had. Yeah, so I should say association. You can't determine association with causality necessarily. So I better make that scientifically correct.
Right. All right. So all right, in the home stretch here, we've only got a few minutes left, but theological and moral implications. I have heard that tissue from aborted babies is being used in the vaccine. Is this true?
Not in this one.
Okay. Very good.
And in fact,
I thought he was going to go for a short one there, Joey.
Just like he said no. No.
Well, I wanted to tell you about something because there maybe just one quick thing, because our hospital was collecting placentas to use stem cells, and I would never be involved with baby harvesting for this reason. There actually should be very little to no reason to baby harvest, because guess what? I can do a scraping, which we first did on a chimpanzee, and now I can get stem cells from actually your skin. And so other than somebody that doesn't know that technology that wants to do the shorter cuts, but we really don't need to do that. And so
repeat that because we lost you.
Oh,
we really don't.
We do not really need to do stem cells therapy by baby harvesting transplant. We technically can get stem cells even from the skin, as we proved through chimpanzee, if they're willing to go through the technology level to do that. You know, there may be other things we're experimenting with. I am not familiar with right at this point. I may not have been in writing that I may not be familiar with, but I do know about stem cell because I was actually collecting things, but I refuse to be involved with stillbirths. Now mothers can donate a stillbirth baby for lots of different things, but
that's different than abortion.
Yeah, different than abortion. The abortion is taking a live baby with a dead baby, and then harvesting it. And is there going to be a financial reason to do that? And the mother gets, and there was actually financial exchange. So that I will never support that as a position.
Okay, does the vaccine contain some kind of tag that allows me to be tracked?
Yeah, it's Scotty says, beam me up. The answer is yes.
I assume you're being facetious.
Yes. Better be clear about that. Well, the answer to that, technically you could do a blood test and we could track exactly who you were to the level of your just taking viral antibodies of your exposures, and we can use that pattern, and technically we could track exactly where you've been, because if we looked at viral subspecies. But to answer your question, implantable devices, there is no implantable devices.
And I think that's probably where they were asking about was, is there a microchip or some nanotechnology or something like that?
Well, there's nanotechnology
involved in this vaccine.
Yeah, messenger RNA, put nanotechnology, putting it into.
But not like a nano tracking
No,
chip.
no, not like that. Now, I want to tell you where this all came from, if that's okay, because it all generated from Bill Gates.
Somebody told me Bill Gates this morning. Somebody asked me today.
Yeah, Bill Gates. And I actually agreed with him to do that. Now, I'll tell you the reasoning for that. When you do missions,
we just lost half our participants.
No, but I don't agree from the Antichrist perspective. But I think he'd be a lot smarter. Like, you're more likely with currency. You know, we're talking about the money, that's currency. Because remember, buy, sell, or trade. If this
track, or cell phone.
Or cell phone, yeah. So the reason that he discussed that, which actually generated this whole thing, was he's been big on vaccines across the world. He has his own vaccine research, and his deal was dealing with malaria, because malaria affects 200 million people every year. So it's probably one of the biggest things.
And so he thought it was a good idea. Wow.
Well, it is, and because if you go in, and I had this too, and I actually track my patients too, not with nanotechnology, but they come in because we know.
Let me sum it up here, because we're getting ready to run out of time.
Okay.
What you're trying to tell us is that it's good to be able to know who has had a vaccine, and that's why you would have supported it, even though it's not included in this one.
No, that's right.
But what it does not do is allow a satellite to track us.
That's right. That's right. And so, you know, the short is that very often when I'm supplying medicine, people are going to come in line a second or third time, and they're going to,
because they don't realize that's not good for them.
No, that's right.
Right.
And or the hoard medicine.
We're talking about third world countries.
Third world countries. And that's, he couldn't track it because they don't have doctors, they don't have medical charts, and that would be just a tag that we could permanently know, did they have it, so they're not wasting vaccine on somebody that's already had it or cause harm to it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's where the discussion started with that.
So that's where it came from, because he discussed doing that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's where it started, because he discussed it.
Yeah, I don't want to track people, but I would like to know that I'm not wasting resources.
And that's just real quickly, that's just a thing about technology. Technology can be used good, or it can be bad.
Absolutely.
So those things do give governments and things the ability to control people if they want to do it that way, but they can do the same thing with our cell phones.
It is. I'm totally against it.
Right.
That part.
Right.
So.
And we don't have to worry about that.
No, we don't have to worry about that.
Okay, so I've heard preachers say that this is a precursor to the mark of the beast, and that you can be tracked by taking a vaccine, and you just said, no, that's not true.
Other than an antibody, somebody tested
what? But that wouldn't be any different than DNA. So
yeah, that's right.
Because we could do that too.
Yeah,
and you wouldn't have to have a vaccine to get that.
Yeah,
exactly.
You commit a crime.
And just from a theological standpoint, if I might weigh in on this one for a minute, what this isn't doing is not determining whether you can buy or sell. It's not requiring you to denounce Jesus to take it, which is going to be a part of that mark.
Absolutely.
It's not I don't know of any 666 that's attached to this thing. So there's several things we could talk about just from a theological perspective that this is. Could it be a precursor? No, I don't really think so, because that kind of technology is going to be different. But even if it was, we could say anything's a precursor. That really doesn't matter. The question is it the mark? And it's definitely not the mark.
No, it's not.
Okay. I mean, I'm going to give the theological way in there, so I can finally get something where I know what I'm talking about. With there being so many lies in the government over 2020, how do we know they didn't come up with this to destroy the people?
Well, you're talking about the vaccine.
The vaccine, yeah.
Oh, because the data is pretty strong the other way. I mean,
and we talked about this is done by scientists, not by politicians.
Yeah, that's right. I wouldn't let a politician study my body.
Right.
but I think Dr. Watts, I may be wrong with this, but especially African American population.
Oh yeah.
They have been tricked before.
That was
by the government, which is awful. I can't believe that.
It was. And it was 40 years of not treating them for tertiary syphilis just to see what the disease was. And this happened with grandparents and great grandparents. It's that generation, and so that distrust is carried forward. And so here we had an interesting thing. We wanted the highest risk people in our society are, guess what? African American. And what do they have lower than you? Their vitamin D, 82% are deficient.
I should have known that. Vitamin D is always the answer to it.
Yeah.
Any questions?
It's kind of like a multiple
It's
choice.
like Sunday school, the answer is always Jesus.
That's right.
Here it's always vitamin
Vitamin
D.
D. No, that is true though. That's actually one thing. So I particularly emphasize to them that, to protect it, because the African American male, age related, is 3 times higher likely to die.
And on that point, with the syphilis studies, for example, I think one of the things that I would look at, and you can tell me if you agree with this or don't, but with that one, it was an isolated study that was done by, now it was done over a long period of time,
40 years.
and it was horrific. I'm not qualifying it, but what I am saying is that
We learned
it was not
something.
scrutinized by the entire world like this has been.
It wasn't. This is so many eyes in it. You can imagine somebody will lose their job permanently, and they'll be banned from NIH from getting. If they lied about this, they
You'd
would
have
be.
to assume the whole healthcare industry is involved.
Oh,
in
the
this
whole
stuff.
healthcare would be.
And they
involved.
didn't have to be in those cases.
Just remember when this became an executive order by our president, he did not trust either entity completely. He
Right.
wanted to make sure somebody could not come in. So we had independent parties involved in evaluating this. Besides that, which we haven't in the past, we always gave this big power stroke to FDA.
And even down to the big metropolis of Clinton and a local doctor who has looked at it carefully. So
Yeah,
everybody's looking at it.
yeah, the final scrutiny, right?
Now, I say that not to diminish Dr. Watts at all, because he could work in any hospital in the world. But I say that just from a standpoint that even local doctors have been studying this and looking
Oh,
at
yes.
this. And
Every one of our
scrutinizing it.
doctors has been looking at. And I would have to tell you, virtually everybody in the doctor aspect of it, if you want to look at medical doctors, has had this vaccine.
Yeah.
So there's one thing, if I didn't think it was safe for myself, I'm not going to
Right.
safe for my patient either. I'm not going to promote something that my job is not about a financial reward. There's no financial reward to this.
Right.
And but the thing is, I hate seeing death, and I've already seen it many times, and it just bothers me to say I don't like to be helpless without being able to do something.
Absolutely.
And this is probably the most effective way. We don't even have an FDA-approved drug to use on it. The one we spend hundreds of millions of dollars we actually bought for at the hospital. We found it hasn't saved one life. That's remdesivir.
Right.
It's not saved one life, and we're still using it.
Right.
It might help if you did it early, but most of the time, by the time you qualify for hospital, day 7, it's too late. The antiviral that works in the beginning, it doesn't work at the end. So, we need
We're starting
something.
to lose people, so I got to go.
Yeah,
here.
but
But let me give you one last question
Okay.
that we got online, and then let Joey do some wrap up for us. If a person with dormant TB gets the vaccine, can it hurt them?
With the dormant TB, no, it should not affect their TB.
Okay.
Yeah, remember, this is not an immunosuppressant, and it's not creating a living organism. It's only creating a small picture of part of one simple protein.
And again, it's not affecting what's in your body already. It's only
It's
attacking the virus.
gone in a
that's
few
your
hours.
body.
It's out in the cytoplasm, not in the DNA,
Stimulating your body.
Yeah.
Okay.
to produce this.
All right, Joey, have we met your requirements tonight?
We have. I just have one question. This comes from my wife. She has O negative blood. So she thinks that means she's immune from getting COVID.
And that would be a false belief.
Say that again.
It's called false belief.
I think it lowers your percentages, but you can still
It
get
is.
COVID. Okay.
Well, the difference between O negative blood, and that is an interesting topic, and I happen to be the opposite end. I'm A positive. A positive is the highest risk. I have a 30% higher chance of serious consequences than an O negative because I have A positive blood. And so it would go to O positive being next, and then you'd be the B's, and then the AB, and A positive is the highest risk.
I don't even know what mine is, so I need to find out next time I get
You're
it.
high risk all the way
I know I
through.
got vitamin D in my blood.
Well,
That's
that's
what
it.
Hey, yeah, that's right. And Joey, I am a little booked up right now, but for you, the marriage counseling, I can help you out. Just really.
But again, I want to thank Rodney. He's been a wonderful host. He set all this up, and great host, great moderator. And I appreciate you doing that. And appreciate Dr. Watts doing this. He's a very, very busy man. And as Rodney was saying a while ago, he may be here locally in Clinton. My father came to him before I knew what was going on with my father. He diagnosed my father's facial cancer and skin cancer when nobody else did. In fact, we went to a specialist in Charleston, University of Charleston down in South Carolina, the cancer specialist. They came out and told me the exact thing that Dr. Watts said. I said, I already know that. And they said, how do you know that? I said, you must not know Dr. Watts. They were amazed that
I'll get the quarters in the mail right
now. They were amazed. But again, this is not to put pressure on anyone. I hope this has been beneficial. Believe it or not, I care about you as my employees. I care about our family. I care about our children. I personally think we should get the vaccine, but I'm not going to be mad at you or upset with you if you don't get the vaccine. This is your choice. But I really just wanted you to have all the facts, and I don't know if anyone that knows the facts better than Dr. Watts. And take vitamin D, by the way.
That's right.
But again, this is what this is all about. This is just information. Do with it what you want to do with it. But again, I do believe that it's important that we get this vaccine. But this is all I'm going to say on the matter from this point on. Again, appreciate you joining tonight. And Dr. Watts, is there one last thing you would say?
Well, I did this off the cuff without any preparation, but I hate to do things like that. I really would have liked to prepare. One of the things is to provide something I can leave with you.
He's prepared most of his life. Let's just say it that way.
I don't know. But I would do this. If there's something that you want to prove or disprove, even whether it's anything that I've said tonight and you want support, I would be glad to go through and we'll provide that. We could try to put things online. I want you to have accuracy. I want you to read Matthew 24:24. And if you want to know, and that's why we have distrust in this, there's more false beliefs that are generated in our generation probably than all generations before us. So Matthew 24:24 says, in the final hour, that even the elect will be deceived, except we cut the day short. So we don't want anybody to be deceived.
Right.
We want you to be informed. We don't want you to die because of a false belief. We want you to live because of belief, and we want eternal life. We want you to live because of your belief in Jesus Christ. And please, if there's something I can do to help you, I don't want to mislead you. We're not about forcing anybody to do anything, but I have a burden right now that I want the truth to be out because there's so much untruth that's spread for different reasons. And so please feel free. We can try to do something else if that was going to be helpful to you, and I'll provide scientific literature and do some studies for you and help out.
And again, thank you. I know it's been long, and I just want to end this with prayer. Rodney, if you don't mind just closing with prayer. Rodney Hall, wonderful man of God and wonderful heart. And but Rodney, thank you. I think when you just bask this in prayer and seek the Lord on this, speak to your personal physician or Dr. Watts, if again available if you can. I tell you, he's hard to get up with. He's a busy, very somewhat active physician. But he took time out to do this. And I know this man's hard. He goes to mission field and gives injections and vaccines to children. It works a long hours to do that. So he spoke from the heart tonight. And again, I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for joining. I know it's getting late, and I'll pass you on to close us out with prayer.
Sure thing. Father, we're just so grateful tonight for your people who have dedicated their life to service for us, for mankind. And Father, I thank you tonight for answers that have certainly touched me as I've wondered about some of these same questions that people have asked tonight. I thank you for the wonderful questions that came in. I thank you for this inquisitive group of people. I thank you for what this is going to do, even when we share it with others, that it's going to help people. And Father, I thank you for Dr. Watts and for Joey. And I just pray that your blessings continue to be upon them and upon Baptist Children's Home and all the ministries that are associated. Father, I just pray for your blessings upon all of them. Thank you for the work that all of them are doing. And just, Lord, encourage them, strengthen them, help them. And Father, I pray that you'll give wisdom in this decision-making process, that your word will be clear. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Have a wonderful, wonderful night.